Ladies, gentlemen, and adventurers of all ages, Baldurs Gate 3 has been officially released on PC for a couple of weeks now, and there's been a lot of things happening in the orbit of this game. Updates for the game itself, drama from outside sources, stats about how the launch of the game has gone, and some really strange statements from the community as well. So let's break down some of the recent happenings surrounding Baldurs Gate 3, what's going on, and what it means for the game. Starting off then with Hotfix 4 and its glorious return to the game. The other day this hotfix was applied, but then rolled back about 3 hours afterwards due to a bug within, and it unfortunately caused a number of people to have unplayable saves as Hotfix 4 saves were incompatible with earlier versions of the game. There were worries that this could be a big deal, and then about 18 hours later, just after I originally talked about this issue on the channel, the hotfix was re-released in a fixed state, fixing all these issues in a particularly timely manner, so honestly it wasn't even that big of a deal in the long run. We talked about the patch notes last time that we visited this as well, so I will just show them here quick. We don't need to dive too deep into them. Nothing has changed from the last time we saw them other than fixing the crashing issues that the patch was causing. All the other changes are the exact same here. Then second up, let's talk about something released by the developers themselves, some official statistics for how the game is done on its opening weekend. An important thing to keep in mind even with this is that it appears the game is actually growing with time, the player base increasing since launch, and we haven't had our console release yet either. That said, here are the stats. 368 people finished the game in the opening weekend, which is actually nuts to me because either these people didn't sleep the whole weekend or they ignored like every side quest in the game, which is a crazy way to play this in my eyes. But hey, that said, without the context of what the game is, if a random game told people that 368 people finished their game a few days after release, that would be a really bad statistic for most games, especially AAA ones, which are generally designed to be completable pretty quickly, because the expectation is that it would be completable in that time. Baldurs Gate 3 really, though, is the exception to that in the industry. More than 93% of players made custom characters, which I totally respect as a concept. It's fun to create your entirely unique character and thrust them into this pre-existing world. That's half of what makes Dungeons & Dragons fun in the first place, so yeah, of course people wanted that feeling in this game too. Players spent a combined 88 years in character creation. That's a really hefty one. I mean, of course this is one of those games that rewards painstaking detail in making your character perfect, but 88 years is a really long time. Again though, more a testament to the detail allowed in the character creator than anything else. And then nearly 10% of characters spent at least an hour in character creation. Come on, raise your hands. You're out there. I know you're there. My hand's up. I know you can't see it, but yeah, it's there, so there's no shame in this at all. It's a big part of what the game is really. If your character isn't perfect, it won't help you sink into the experience. All that said, there's also the companion side of these things, as you can also choose to play as a number of the companion options too. The most popular one to choose to actually play by a good margin then is Gale. Totally respect that. Wizards are awesome and he's got some real charm to him too. Then we have Karlach. Again, barbarians are awesome and Karlach has a very interesting story and awesome aesthetic as well. Then it's Astarion just behind her, and then it drops off pretty heavily before the next one's on the list. Funnily enough, the 7th most common cause of death that players experienced in the entire game was also Gale, specifically from the sound of it, just not quite aiming spells all that well, you know, it happens, right? Then we just have a couple of graphs as well showing the popularity of the different classes and races, and honestly, none of this really surprises me at all. It very much lines up with what I would call regular Dungeons & Dragons expectations, with some slight consolations of course made there for the fact that it is a video game, and there are a lot more people who'd want to min-max in this than they would in the tabletop setting. Paladin being the most popular class, with Sorcerer just behind, makes a lot of sense. Then they're actually pretty much all totally even except for Cleric as far as the classes go. For races though, half-elf at the top, of course, people who don't want to be a human because that's boring, but also don't want to go too crazy with it either. I see you out there, I know you're the ones choosing this. Then it's human, then elf, and it slowly drops as you get to, sadly, actually, the short races. People just completely avoided the short races. Then also half-orcs and Githyanki, I guess for some reason. I don't know, but as someone whose two characters are a half-orc and a halfling, I'm happy to represent the less chosen options here. Almost 100,000 people were rejected by Astarion in the first weekend. No shame there, totally get it. 815,000 NPCs have been shoved into a chasm, and honestly this is one of my favorite parts of the game. Shoving enemies a mile away off of the side of the environment is just so much fun. I just wish that you could also loot them when you do this too. Then the stat that of all player deaths, 12% of them were from friendly fire. This really puts into perspective the earlier number that Gale is responsible for 7% of player deaths, because it means he accounts for more than half of all friendly fire done in the entire game, and that's just really funny to say about a wizard, and honestly quite predictable. At least as far as Act 1 goes, 2/3 of the player base chose the good guy route, and 1/3 chose the less good route, one that some people might even call evil, but it's all a matter of perspective. Scratch the Dog has received over 750,000 pets, and players have spoken to 1.4 million corpses, as well as 2.4 million animals. It is a little bit worrying that corpses is almost almost the same amount of animals, but I guess that's life, right? Or death. Then we see that players as a whole have played for at least 10 million hours. My favorite part of this is comparing this with the number of pets for scratches at 750,000. The math here means that for every 13.3 hours of Baldur's Gate 3 played by someone, scratches received 1 pet. Honestly, we need to get that number to be higher. Once per 13 hours is not bad if you consider the whole community and the fact that some people might not have even found scratches, but I think it should definitely be higher. We need to pet that dog more. All this to say, the game is popular, it's healthy, the stats show that it's doing well, it's being updated, and hey, here's some fun news. According to Metacritic, Baldur's Gate 3 is actually currently the 6th highest reviewed PC game of all time, literally all time. This number has been jumping around a bit, but it's still settling. There was a period where the game was actually in the number 1 slot, which is nuts, but currently it has settled down at number 6 for the moment, which is still a ridiculously respectable place to sit, considering some of the things that are surrounding it. Next up, we have the concept of cut content from the game, from Baldur's Gate 3 on release, and there are a number of things people are talking about being cut, but there are 2 main ones from what I can tell. The first one is an actual full-on companion, which would be Alfira, the Tiefling Bard. She's at the Tiefling camp in Act 1, she can move to the Last Light Inn later on in Act 2 in the right circumstances as well, and eventually you can actually get basically her entire inventory as a quest reward. This combined with there not being a bard companion proper otherwise, makes it actually somewhat believable that this character could have been a companion, especially as the point in the story where she gives you her things could have just been the same point in the story, she just decides to join you instead. That said, there is nothing to truly back this up, just a whole lot of speculation. Still, I think it's interesting nonetheless. The other main bit of content is actually a whole area in Act 3. Before the game came out, one of the things Larian talked about in interviews was how they had finished the upper city area of Baldur's Gate for another thing to properly explore and experience within the game, but in the full game, there is in fact no upper city area, at least not properly, it just isn't there, and so this one, unlike the other one, is pretty much all but confirmed to be properly cut content, something that was worked on and then left behind. It just makes sense. Past this, I wanted to talk about some of the controversy that's been surrounding the game, and why it's completely odd to me. The controversy in question is heavily based around this video from IGN. Baldur's Gate 3 is causing some developers to panic. The narrative in here is built from a series of tweets from one person, but is essentially trying to rile the consumer up by saying, hey, the game industry sees a really well-made game and suddenly is freaking out, and that's just not an accurate picture. Even if it is the picture that has been painted, in reality, a good 95% of the posts from developers about Baldur's Gate 3 are all positive, congratulatory type things, and the main reason for this is because this game was an absolute gamble. This is an absolutely insanely large game, an insane amount of time has been put into it, a really hefty license behind it as well, and it just happens to be ready to release but a few months after a Dungeons & Dragons movie released. This is just a perfect storm of attention for a game with this much time put into it, and that's just sort of how Larian works, but it's easily arguable that if some of these things didn't work out the way they did, if the marketing didn't just happen to line up perfectly, this game could have had way less players, made far less money, been far less valuable to the studio as a result, even if the game itself was the exact same masterpiece that it actually is. The point being, the entire process of creation for this game was a massive risk, and most game companies simply are not willing to take those types of risks. They will dip into what made Baldur's Gate 3 work. They will take some things and use them in their own games that they think will improve them, but no game will try and copy the exact process. It was the same with Breath of the Wild. When that came out, so many games immediately afterwards were open world games that had no business being them. They had gliders, everything had gliders, but none of those games truly tried to recreate what Breath of the Wild was at its core, a properly sandbox open world game. And Baldur's Gate 3 is sort of the same way. It's just a really unique concept, a fresh way of doing a genre, and done with an artist paintbrush level of precision. From what I can tell, all the drama is essentially just fabricated because one mid-level developer tried to voice a single opinion, a video got made about that one opinion which generalized it significantly, and then everyone decided that that was just the way that the world was, and the internet ran away with it from there. It's not the case though, really. Everyone is just sort of happy for Larian and their massive accomplishment. Then finally, there is one more thing I want to talk about, and it's just one of those things that makes me love this kind of game. This is a Reddit post, a Baldur's Gate 3 Reddit post. Immediately, you're reading the title, and you may think this is some kind of weird troll post or a joke of some sort, then you click it, and it's a genuine, accurate bug report for the game. This is incredible. How often do you see a post with that kind of title that also comes with genuine information and isn't just like some weird child's attempt at a joke? It's just amazing to me. And that's it for today, everyone. A roundup of some of the more recent Baldur's Gate 3 news. We're just about all caught up now, so everything in the future that we cover will be properly new, fresh stuff hot off the presses. In other words, information that we learn over time. I hope you've enjoyed this breakdown of the news currently, and I hope you continue to enjoy your time with Baldur's Gate 3 itself. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next next time, stay sweet. Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.